Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Valeria Vivano. Valeria Fernandez Vivano was born on May 29, 1996 in Laguna, a small commune near Santiago, Chile's capital city. She was the youngest of 3 children born to Miguel and Jacqueline Vivano. Valeria grew up with her older biological siblings, Michelangelo and Daniela. Her father worked for a transportation company, while her mother was a dedicated homemaker who focused on raising their children and creating a warm home environment. When Valeria started school, her parents decided to separate, which was a huge shock to her. Although they continued to communicate after the divorce, and her father remained involved in their lives, providing financial support, Valeria harbored resentment towards him. They would occasionally argue, sometimes not speaking for months, but they always reconciled. After the divorce, Miguel Vivano remarried and had 2 more children, becoming Valeria's half-siblings. Despite this, Valeria, Daniela, and Michelangelo maintained warm relationships with them. Jacqueline, on the other hand, never remarried, focusing on raising her children and later caring for her grandchildren from her older children. Valeria showed a strong-willed character, determination, and perseverance from a young age. She excelled academically, participated in sports, and demonstrated courage and a strong sense of justice, often putting others' needs before her own. Valeria's desire to help those around her, protect the vulnerable, and fight for justice likely inspired her to pursue a career in law enforcement. After graduating from high school, Valeria enrolled in the police academy in Santiago, where she graduated with honors in 2016 at the age of 20. The following year, she joined the Chilean police force and began working in the capital's serious crimes unit. From the start of her career, Valeria demonstrated herself to be a dedicated and passionate law enforcement officer, driven by a strong sense of justice. She was deeply committed to her job, performing her duties with diligence and always ready to respond to any situation at a moment's notice. Whether it meant leaving in the middle of the night to investigate a crime scene, pursuing suspects at personal risk, or providing emotional support to those who had lost loved ones, Valeria was always willing to go the extra mile. Her colleagues praised her as kind, cheerful, and friendly, yet she remained a consummate professional and trustworthy partner. Over nearly 5.5 years of service, Valeria received numerous accolades and awards, rapidly advancing in her career and earning the respect of her peers and the admiration of her superiors. A highlight of her career was representing her department in Spain, where she spent 2 weeks in Madrid on an official visit, an experience that filled her with immense pride. By 2020, she had risen to the rank of assistant inspector. A 21-year-old rookie cop, Lionel Alejandro Contreras Canales, joined the precinct where Valeria worked, fresh from the police academy. Valeria took him under her wing, becoming his mentor in his first job. A few months into their partnership, they got along fairly well. Not much is known about Lionel's upbringing, but it's believed he came from a wealthy and influential family with a high-ranking official as an uncle, which gave him a life of comfort and luxury. As a result, Lionel was self-absorbed, expecting everything to go his way. Valeria soon caught Lionel's attention, and he made several attempts to win her over, asking her out on dates, but she rejected him each time. Valeria was dedicated to her job and saw workplace romances as unprofessional. She was also strict with Lionel, viewing him as immature. Although Lionel was only 3 years younger, Valeria found his behavior childish and hoped to help him grow up. On May 29, 2021, Valeria turned 25. She celebrated her birthday at her mother's house, surrounded by many guests, including relatives, friends, and work colleagues. However, Lionel was not invited. Valeria intentionally left him out to avoid any potential awkwardness, as he had recently tried to rekindle their romance. When she talked to him about it, he only reaffirmed his feelings for her, which she wanted to keep private from their colleagues. Valeria looked upset despite the festivities. She was trying to conceal her sadness with a fake smile. The recent quarrel with her father had caused days of silence between them, and she had hoped he would put their differences aside and come to her party, giving them a chance to make up. But all he did was send a congratulatory message without even bothering to phone her. Jacqueline, Valeria's mother, noticed her daughter's distress and knew that the rift with her father was the cause of her sadness. Angry at her ex-husband's actions, she was convinced that Miguel would eventually reach out to Valeria and they would talk things through and reconcile. Tragically, Valeria and her father never got the chance to resolve their issues. 2 weeks later, she lost her life in a fatal shooting while on duty on June 13, 2021. Valeria was participating in street patrols and vehicle checks that night, searching for suspects related to a crime that had occurred the previous day in a suburb of the capital. The police had issued an alert for a white Kia Chato, believed to be driven by a suspected criminal who was likely armed and possibly accompanied by others in the car. Valeria was riding in a patrol car with her partner Lionel, driven by Deputy Commissioner Felipe Gilardo. They spotted the suspect's vehicle and immediately gave chase without waiting for backup. The officers successfully intercepted and blocked the suspect's escape. Canales and Vivano jumped out of their vehicle, guns drawn, and yelled for the offenders to surrender and exit their car with their hands raised. Just then, a single shot rang out, and in the ensuing chaos, Valeria clutched her side and fell to the asphalt beside the police car. Reinforcements arrived simultaneously, and her colleagues heard the shot and saw that she was wounded, but they couldn't fully comprehend what had happened or who had fired. The criminals took advantage of the momentary confusion, sped away, and escaped the scene. Despite the swift arrival of medics and her colleagues' efforts to stop the bleeding, Valeria's life couldn't be saved. She was rushed to the nearest hospital, where top specialists fought to save her life for several hours. Unfortunately, due to severe blood loss and damage to vital organs, Valeria passed away on the operating table, never regaining consciousness. Valeria's family rushed to the hospital after hearing the news, but they were too late. Miguel, her dad, was overwhelmed with grief and regret, haunted by their recent petty argument. His guilt was so intense, it put his own health at risk. Valeria died in the line of duty during an operation to catch dangerous criminals, hailed as a hero for giving her life to ensure others' peace and safety. Local media extensively covered the story, praising her courage and selflessness. The public was shocked and captivated by the arrests, and soon the suspects were identified as 19-year-old Miguel Alejandro Cupin and his 17-year-old accomplice, whose name was not released due to his age. Both had previous convictions for minor crimes. In response to the arrests, Chile's president, Miguel Juan Sebastián Pinera, issued an official statement promising that those responsible would face the full extent of the law. As the investigation progressed, some facts didn't add up. Valeria's body was returned to her family after the autopsy and buried in a capital city cemetery, with hundreds attending the funeral. Her parents described the experience as a terrible nightmare. Notably, among those who carried Valeria's coffin was her colleague Lionel, who seemed more grief-stricken than anyone else. However, other colleagues reported that there had been recent tension between Valeria and Lionel, to the extent that Valeria didn't even invite him to her birthday celebration. Legal proceedings started right after the funeral against those arrested the next day. Initially, everyone thought the guilty ones were caught and proving it would be easy. But it soon became clear the investigation was flawed, with key details missed and evidence ignored. A month and a half after the officer's death, 2 employees were suspended for their alleged role in the incident. Valeria's parents were called to the prosecutor's office, expecting new evidence. Instead, they were devastated to learn from prosecutor Juan Carlos Carrasco that their daughter died from a bullet fired by her colleague. Subsequent investigations showed that the fatal shot was fired from a service weapon held by one of Valeria's co-workers. A same-day ballistics test confirmed this, but the results were tampered with, and the bullet's characteristics, shape, caliber, and weight were incorrectly recorded in the evidence locker. Furthermore, the bullet had passed through Valeria's body, but it wasn't extracted. Instead, it was reported to have been extracted, and the entry and exit wounds in the forensic reports were switched. The shot was fired into her back, not her abdomen. Furthermore, the detainees who were on trial, claiming to have confessed to their involvement and were on the verge of imprisonment, began filing complaints. They alleged that their confessions were obtained through torture and threats, and the pistol they had with them that evening was not even loaded. Moreover, their involvement in the prior crime that prompted the interception plan that fateful night remained unconfirmed. A surprising twist emerged in the public's perception of Vivano, transforming her from a tragic hero who died in the line of duty to an innocent victim betrayed by her own colleagues. As a result, the main suspect shifted to Felipe Gilardo Ara, who was driving the police car, and Lionel Alejandro Contas Canales, Vivano's partner, who was seated in the back. Both were immediately suspended from duty. On August 5th, it was discovered that the fatal bullet came from a police-issued weapon. A document surfaced showing examination results that implicated Lionel as the prime suspect, as he was the only one with gunshot residue on his hands, a crucial finding that had been mysteriously left out of previous reports. Additionally, several other vital documents, including ballistics examination reports and the pathologist's conclusions, were improperly stored in an archive box that had not been thoroughly reviewed. It remains unclear whether this was an accident, an oversight, or a deliberate attempt to conceal crucial evidence. The police officers involved in the operation to catch the criminals surprisingly became suspects in the murder of their fellow officer. Along with the suspects already arrested, they participated in a reenactment of the events of that night to clarify what had happened. In the reenactment, Philippe, who was driving, explained that he could only see Valeria, who was sitting next to him in the front passenger seat, when she got out of the car. Lionel, who was sitting behind them, also exited the vehicle, but Philippe couldn't see what he was doing. According to Philippe, Valeria took just a few steps before a shot was fired, causing her to fall to the ground. At that point, Lionel rushed to help the injured woman and provide first aid to try to save her life. Lionel gave a different account of what happened, saying that he and his partner Valeria got out of the patrol car at almost the same time, but she rushed forward immediately after the shot was fired. He denied shooting his colleague, Valeria, and claimed that Philippe, the driver, should have seen him trying to help Valeria and confirmed this. According to Lionel, he was the first to assist Valeria and tried to stop her bleeding to prevent her from dying. The investigation managed to reconstruct the events, despite inconsistencies in the witnesses' statements. They found that Canales was behind his partner when the shot was fired, which corresponded with the bullet's trajectory. Furthermore, he was the only one with traces of gunshot residue on his hands. Lionel was arrested as prime suspect after secret reports and test results were released, while other detainees were freed on condition they stay local, lacking evidence to implicate them. But the officers' motives remained unclear. The prevailing theory is that a tragic accident occurred when an inexperienced young officer unintentionally fired his weapon while standing behind his partner. In a state of panic, he attempted to assist her. Later, when submitting his service weapon, he falsely claimed not to have fired it. However, the truth eventually came to light, exposing that influential relatives of the young officer exploited their power, wealth, and connections to conceal the incident, leading to fabricated reports, missing documents, contradictory evidence, and coerced testimony from detained individuals. Despite Canales' arrest, suspicions about Felipe's involvement persisted. Felipe was also armed with the same service weapons, was present at the scene, and could have accidentally fired the fatal shot. Additionally, Felipe had a history of using his weapon unjustifiably during an arrest. although no one was harmed on that occasion. The defense team, hired by Lionel's relatives, presented a theory that Philippe might have accidentally shot his colleague due to the identical service weapons, which could have been mixed up or intentionally swapped. Philippe's own testimony was inconsistent, and he claimed he couldn't accurately describe the events that took place. Despite this, the lack of gunpowder residue on the driver's hands suggested his innocence. Philippe's explanation that the residue came from when he was compressing the victim's wound was not believable, given that Valeria's blood stains remained on his hands. The investigation was widely criticized, and the victim's parents were left feeling desperate, leading to public outrage and a loss of trust in law enforcement. Following further investigation, Lionel remained the sole suspect. Lionel was ultimately found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 12 years in prison. However, in a surprise move, the Supreme Court later overturned the sentence, reducing his imprisonment to just 540 days. Valeria's family is now planning to sue the Chilean state, accusing the judges of corruption. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Channon Christian. Hugh Christopher Newson Jr., commonly known as Chris, was born on September 21, 1983 in Knoxville, Tennessee to Mary and Hugh Newson, who raised him in a loving and large family. As the youngest child, he was deeply adored by his family members. During his youth, Chris showcased exceptional athletic abilities, particularly excelling in baseball throughout his school years. His coach firmly believed that he had a promising future in the sport, but a severe injury and the subsequent prolonged recovery process, unfortunately, ended his athletic career. Despite this setback, Chris possessed a multitude of talents. He was an skilled artist, a proficient guitar player, had impressive woodworking skills, and possessed in-depth knowledge about cars and motorcycles, having dreamed of becoming a mechanic during his youth. Following high school, Chris's passion for carpentry took center stage, leading him to attend the prestigious University of Tennessee, where he proved to be a diligent student, consistently ranking among the top of his class. Channon Christian was born on April 29, 1985, in Nacogdoches, Texas, to Dina and Gary Christian, the younger of their two children. She grew up with her older brother Chase, with whom she had a close and loving relationship. What made their birth even more special was that their mother, Dina, had been diagnosed with infertility in her younger years, making the arrival of her two children a remarkable blessing. In 1997, the Christian family relocated to Knoxville, Tennessee, where the children attended local schools and their parents started a thriving family business. Dina worked from home, conducting individual psychotherapy sessions, while Channon, who shared her mother's passion for psychology, was an outgoing and kind-hearted individual. After high school, Channon went on to study sociology at the University of Tennessee and worked part-time to save up for her dream car. On her 21st birthday, her parents and brother helped make her dream a reality by contributing towards the purchase of a silver Toyota 4Runner. In the same month, Channon and Christopher were invited to a mutual friend's birthday party. Channon visited a beauty salon to prepare for the celebration and parked her car in a nearby underground garage where they had planned to meet. However, Christopher was delayed, leading to a brief argument between them as they were running late for the event. As they failed to show up at the party, their friends became increasingly worried, knowing that it was unlike them to miss an event without notification. Attempts to reach them on their phones were unsuccessful. Channon's friend called her mom repeatedly, getting no response. The next morning, Dina noticed Channon hadn't come home. At first, she thought Channon might have stayed at Chris's after the party or gone to work from there. But when she saw missed calls from an unknown number, her concern grew. The caller said Channon and Chris never showed up to the party and weren't answering their phones. Dina feared the worst, and Chris's parents were equally worried, thinking he was at Channon's. Channon's parents grew anxious when they found out she, like Chris, had missed work. They contacted police, but the officer was unhelpful, suggesting the couple just wanted alone time. The parents took matters into their own hands, launching a search effort with friends, contacting acquaintances, visiting hospitals, and spreading the word on social media. Despite their efforts, no useful leads emerged. Channon was last seen at a beauty salon on Saturday, chatting about an upcoming party. It wasn't until Monday, January 8th, that the police officially launched their investigation into the disappearance of Channon Christian and Christopher Newson. By then, thanks to the tireless efforts of their parents and friends, the entire city was aware of the missing couple. The previous day, rumors had begun circulating about a disturbing discovery near the railroad tracks, although no concrete details were available. A railroad worker, while inspecting the tracks in his designated area, discovered badly damaged human remains on the embankment beside the tracks. The body was in a gruesome state, with multiple injuries, and had been drenched in a flammable liquid in an attempt to set it on fire. Upon responding to the scene, the police cordoned off the area and conducted a meticulous examination, but were unable to find any significant clues or leads. After taking necessary photographs, the remains were sent to the morgue for an autopsy to establish the cause of death and attempt to identify the victim, although it was clear that the extensive damage and effects of the fire would make this challenging. Forensic experts determined that the body belonged to a young man who had suffered a brutal and prolonged death. The victim had sustained multiple injuries while still alive, indicating a severe and lengthy assault. Almost all of his teeth had been knocked out or damaged by blows, and he had been shot 3 times, twice in the back and a final fatal shot to the head. Furthermore, traces of seminal fluid from at least 3 different men were found in his body, along with distinctive tears suggesting repeated violent assaults. When police reviewed recent reports of missing young men, they found that Christopher Newson matched the description in terms of age, height, and build. The officers then contacted his parents and asked for DNA samples to confirm the identity, while strongly advising them against viewing the body at the morgue due to its badly burned and unrecognizable state. Unfortunately, the DNA analysis subsequently confirmed that the body was indeed that of the missing student, Christopher Newson. The search for Channon continued, despite the distressing news about Christopher. Channon Christian's parents were still holding on to the hope that their daughter was alive, possibly being held captive somewhere. The last known location of her mobile phone was in one of Knoxville's more troubled neighborhoods on the day the couple disappeared, which suggested that they might have been taken there against their will. This led the parents to believe that Channon might still be being held in that area. In a secluded alley of this neighborhood, Channon's Toyota 4Runner was discovered abandoned and in a terrible state. The SUV was dirty, scratched, and had broken headlights and deflated tires. Additionally, all of Channon's personal belongings were missing, and the car was littered with cigarette butts. The seats were torn and stained, and the driver's seat was pushed far back, indicating that a large adult male had last driven the vehicle. A crumpled envelope with the address 2316 Chipman Street was found on the floor between the seats, likely dropped by the perpetrator. A local witness reported seeing 4 African-American males driving the SUV that Saturday evening, which stood out in that area. The fingerprints on the envelope led the police to Lamas Davidson, a man with prior convictions for serious offenses. His residence, located in an industrial area near a wasteland, had no witnesses. When no one responded to the police's knock and offered to surrender, they forced entry, hoping to find Channon alive inside. Inside the house, the police found Channon's purse, a stuffed toy from her car, Christopher's headphones and baseball cap, and a knife with blood traces. They also discovered torn and blood-stained fragments of women's clothing and, tragically, Channon's lifeless body hidden in the house's trash chute system, wrapped in 5 trash bags and bound in the fetal position under dirty sheets. Experts later determined that she likely died in the early hours of Monday, January 8th. The discovery of Channon Christian's body revealed a terrifying sequence of events. Had the police begun their search immediately, they might have saved her from unimaginable suffering. Instead, her body was found with every inch covered in bruises, abrasions, cuts, and cigarette burns. The numerous injuries to her genital area, mouth and throat indicated that she had been subjected to multiple brutal assaults by several men. Channon suffered a severe head injury, internal bleeding in her abdominal area, likely caused by kicks. Multiple stab wounds, though not fatal, were inflicted upon her. Her attackers also extinguished dozens of cigarettes on her skin in an attempt to destroy DNA evidence. They doused her with household bleach, focusing on bleeding wounds and her genital area. She was then forced to ingest bleach. 5 individuals were involved in the brutal crimes against Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom. Lamarcus Davidson, the owner of the house where Channon's mutilated body and Chris's personal belongings were found, was identified as a fugitive. The police also tracked down Eric Boyd, whose DNA was found at the crime scene. Boyd was arrested on January 11th without resisting and agreed to cooperate with the investigation, stating he wouldn't take the fall for crimes he didn't commit. Boyd revealed that Davidson was hiding in a vacant house listed for sale and personally led the police to the location. As a result, Davidson was caught off guard and offered no resistance. Notably, at the time of his arrest, Davidson was wearing Chris's sneakers. During the investigation, Davidson downplayed his role, portraying himself as a victim. He claimed that the couple had come to his house to buy illegal substances, but got caught up in a conflict with his acquaintances. Davidson insisted that he left to avoid involvement, and the subsequent brutal acts occurred while he was away. Further investigation led to the identification of 3 more individuals involved in the case: Davidson's friend George Thomas, his half-brother Latalvis Cobbins, and Vanessa Lynn Coleman, an 18-year-old woman. Once all 5 suspects were arrested, they were put in separate cells and questioned one by one. Each of them tried to shift the blame onto the others, unknowingly providing details of the brutal crime. The pieces of their stories helped to reconstruct the sequence of events and the role each played in the brutal act. Lamarcus Davidson, recently released from prison on parole, was in dire need of money. To support his illegal business of selling banned substances, he urgently needed a vehicle to deliver his goods to customers. Davidson decided to steal a car from an underground parking lot notorious for its lack of surveillance cameras, accompanied by his accomplices. Tragically, students Channon and Christopher were in the parking lot at the same time, arguing over Chris's delay. The criminals, fearing witnesses, forced the couple into the trunk of a car at gunpoint. They was taken to Davidson's house, where they were subjected to brutal beating and repeated assault. After midnight, Christopher, barefoot and undressed, was forced back into the trunk and taken to the railroad tracks. He was ordered to walk on the stones before being shot twice in the back. The final shot to the head ended his suffering. His body was then doused with a flammable liquid and set on fire in an attempt to destroy any evidence that could lead to the perpetrators. After dealing with Christopher, the criminals returned to the house where Channon remained bound. The next day, she endured horrific cruelty, leaving her with no uninjured area on her body. The sadists concluded their torture by dousing her with bleach and packing her, still alive, into plastic trash bags, where she slowly suffocated. The exact moment Vanessa Coleman joined the group is unknown. In her interrogations, Coleman claimed she was a hostage who participated in the torture out of fear for her life. However, Boyd said Coleman was Davidson's girlfriend and willingly took part in the events, even taking Channon's jewelry and mobile phone. Moreover, a diary found at Coleman's home described the horrors at her boyfriend's house, which she called an exciting adventure. During the trials, it was established that Lamarcus Davidson, born in 1981, led the criminal group and instigated the brutal acts against the victims. Although Davidson tried to shift the blame, claiming the couple had come to buy drugs and engaged in consensual rough sex that got out of control, the evidence proved otherwise. Davidson was found guilty on 40 counts, including assault, kidnapping, robbery, and cruel and premeditated murder. The jury unanimously sentenced him to death for his heinous crimes. Latalvis Cobbins, born 1982, was initially faced with the death penalty for his role in the brutal torture, assaults, and murder. However, he was ultimately handed a life imprisonment sentence without parole. George Thomas, born 1983, received a similar life sentence for his involvement in the same heinous crimes, with no possibility of release. Eric Boyd, who cooperated with the investigation and aided in the capture of Davidson, received an 18-year prison sentence. The investigation discovered Vanessa Coleman's, born 1988, involvement in the torture, assaults, and tragic murder of Channon. She was subsequently sentenced to 53 years imprisonment. In 2011, while the convicted felons served their sentences and Davidson awaited execution, the case took an unexpected turn. The presiding judge resigned, citing substance dependency issues, which called into question his ability to conduct the trial fairly. As a result, all verdicts from the previous 2 years were annulled, and new hearings were scheduled for the 5 individuals responsible for the tragic murder of the students. After retrials, Davidson's death sentence was upheld. Cobbins and Thomas both remained incarcerated, each serving a life sentence without parole. However, Thomas's sentence was later modified to include the possibility of parole after 51 years. Vanessa Coleman's original 53-year sentence was reduced to 35 years. Although her 2014 appeal was rejected and parole was denied in 2017, she will remain incarcerated until at least April 2032, as determined by the parole board in 2020. Eric Boyd's circumstances drastically changed. Initially, he got a short sentence for cooperating, but was later retried and received life without parole for his role in the assaults and deaths of 2 victims. His accomplice Thomas testified against him, revealing new details, and got a 15% sentence reduction. Boyd's appeals failed, and he's now serving life at Bledsoe County Correctional Complex. Davidson awaits execution in Riverbend Max Security. The trial sparked media frenzy, leading to 2 new laws. One protects victims from defamation by the accused, who try to shift blame. The other eliminates the need for a judge's signature on a unanimous verdict, preventing retrials and sentence reviews. The house where Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom were brutally tortured was demolished in 2008. A memorial was built on the site in their memory. A charity foundation and golf tournament were established in Christian's name to support violence victims. A foundation in Newsom's name hosts annual baseball tournaments and awards a scholarship in his memory. Initial media reports of the case were inaccurate, sparking public outcry. Some believed racial bias played a role, given the victims were white and perpetrators African American. However, experts and the police chief found no evidence to support this claim, nor that the case would have received more attention if the races were reversed. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Carjan Oviedo. Rolando Angel Aquino was a charismatic individual who naturally drew people's attention. One day he caught the captivating gaze of Carjan Oviedo, a woman with a fiery passion for life and an infectious energy. They instantly connected, sharing similar interests and dreams, as well as a strong determination and entrepreneurial drive. This chance encounter led to a beautiful relationship that brought them true happiness. In 2016, the couple took the next step, moving in together and launching their own business, a warehouse, in their home. Carjan's keen eye for detail shone as she created a welcoming sign on one of the windows for customer service, alongside lists of items for sale. This was their pride and joy, a small but thriving venture. The people of Mañata watched this happy and driven couple with admiration and curiosity, wondering who they were and how they achieved so much. While many knew Carjan from her childhood, Rolando remained an enigma, with his past in Bolivia remaining a mystery to all. Rolando not only co-ran the business with Karjan, but he also worked at the Galeen Fair, where wholesale fruit sales took place. From the outside, it seemed like they had found their perfect life together, but even the strongest relationships can be put to the test. One day, Rolando was shocked to find Karjan in the car with another man. His initial reaction was anger, and in that moment, he almost destroyed the car's interior. Their picture-perfect relationship crumbled in a matter of minutes. However, Rolando decided to forgive and continue their relationship, choosing to move forward with the one he loved. To outsiders, they still appeared to be the ideal couple, capable of overcoming any obstacle together. Rolando Angel Aquino, born in 1987 in Bolivia, is an enigmatic figure. The exact date of his arrival in Argentina remains unknown, like many other aspects of his life. As the eldest of 7 children, Rolando learned the importance of family bonds and hard work from a young age. He dreamed of a happy family filled with joy and laughter. In his youth, he met Carolina Chavez, with whom he had a son. Despite their difficulties, the couple remained on good terms. Later in life, Rolando had a second son, Elias, with Soledad Guardio. Although his relationships with Soledad didn't work out, Rolando remained a devoted and caring father to his children. He maintained a warm relationship with the mothers of his children and stayed in touch with them. Rolando was a physically fit man who prioritized his health from a young age. He played sports and soccer for the local team to stay active. His colleagues and loved ones described him as kind, hardworking, and sociable. Although he got along well with his neighbors, Rolando had a unique charm when it came to socializing. Karjan was born on March 30, 1990, and grew up in Monado, where she and Rolando later set up their warehouse. The locals knew her as an outgoing and open-minded woman. Like Rolando, Karjan longed for a happy and successful family life with a loving and devoted partner. However, it took her some time to find the right person to build her happiness with. Karjan had 2 daughters from previous relationships before meeting Rolando. One of her former partners, Rule O.A., was the father of one of the girls, and she married him in 2013. However, their marriage was troubled and eventually headed for a breakdown. Rule claimed that financial struggles were one of the main reasons for their conflicts. Feeling anxious about his life and seeking better opportunities, Rule left his family under the pretense of buying something essential, fleeing the city and moving abroad to avoid being traced. By the summer of 2019, 9-year-old Elias was living with Rolando and Karjan. They had made plans to spend quality time together in the coming months. However, on the morning of July 12, 2019, Rolando found Elias unwell when he went to wish him good morning before leaving for work. Concerned, Rolando took Elias to the children's hospital to see a pediatrician. After an examination, the doctors determined that Elias's condition was critical, and he was rushed to the intensive care unit. Despite the best efforts of the medical staff, Elias tragically passed away shortly after arriving at the hospital. The remarkable thing about Elias's death was that he had been in perfect health when he left home, showing no unusual symptoms, and seemed equally well when he arrived at his father's house. However, the medical report was shocking. It revealed that Elias had died from severe poisoning, which caused his organs to fail and a blood clot in his brain. This news left Elias's parents stunned, as they could not understand how their active and healthy son could have suddenly died from such a mysterious illness. As part of their professional duty, the doctors recommended further forensic investigation. However, Elias's mother and grandmother were too grief-stricken to consider this, and they refused. The funeral home Karjan suggested cremating the body, but Elias's mother declined, preferring to bury her son in a private cemetery where she could visit his grave and lay flowers. Elias's sudden death shattered Rolando's heart, leaving him devastated by the loss of his youngest son. Karjan, who was caring and loving, stood by him every step of the way, never leaving his side. She took charge of all their business affairs, providing him with gentle support and helping him navigate his pain and grief. As time passed, the warmth and love from the woman he cherished gradually eased his suffering. 16 months after the tragedy, Rolando took a major step and proposed to Karjan, and they got married, with Rolando convinced she'd always be by his side. However, their happiness was short-lived. On February 6, 2022, Karjan returned home from a beauty salon and gym visit, and the next day, February 7th, she noticed Rolando was experiencing serious health issues. A medical ambulance was called to their home as Rolando, 35, suddenly felt very ill after vomiting profusely and collapsed in their living room. The housekeeper called for emergency medical help. At the Santa Maria clinic, doctors allowed Karjan to see her husband, but his condition was critical. Despite the medical staff's efforts, Rolando passed away on February 9th. The cause of death was severe poisoning, which raised questions among the medical staff, given Rolando was a healthy and active sportsman. Rolando's wife, Karjan, revealed that he was taking medication to treat dark skin spots. However, this information raised red flags among specialists. Upon further investigation, tests disclosed an abnormal amount of calcium oxalate crystals in Rolando's system, a telling sign of ethylene glycol poisoning, a key ingredient in car antifreeze. The sudden and mysterious death of Rolando sparked a high-priority investigation by the authorities. The prosecutor's office launched a thorough inquiry into the neighborhood where the Aquino couple resided. Neighbors became crucial witnesses, reporting that Karjan had frequently administered her husband unknown medication. They knew she used these drugs to attend a party without her husband. Nevertheless, neighbors also expressed concerns about Rolando's son, leading investigators to consider the possibility that Karjan intended to sedate her husband temporarily rather than kill him. The Technology Crimes Unit officers' findings completely dismissed the idea that Rolando's death was accidental. They requested forensic examinations and questioned Karjan, Rolando's wife, thoroughly. However, during the interrogation, Karjan's responses were contradictory. The officers asked her to identify the substance she had given her husband before he died, and she claimed it was a skin blemish remedy that she had administered through an IV. When they asked her to produce a vial of the solution, Karjan said the housekeeper, Claudia Cortez, had already thrown it away. But when the officers interviewed Claudia, she denied Karjan's statement about the discarded vial. Claudia also revealed that she had overheard a conversation between the couple in which Rolando expressed dissatisfaction with his medication. Karjan was detained and her cell phone was seized as part of the investigation. The news of Rolando's death shocked his family, friends, and teammates. Those who regularly visited the Aquino couple's warehouse and other locals were also stunned. Everyone struggled to understand what had happened and why the family's father had died so suddenly. Rolando's ex-husband was shocked when rumors started circulating that Karjan had deliberately poisoned him. The ex-husband described Karjan as always being affectionate and never violent towards him. However, an investigation into Karjan's phone revealed that she had searched online for information on the most deadly poisons and ways to erase her search history. Furthermore, records showed that she had ordered ethylene glycol twice from an online store. According to the Agency for Toxic Substances and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, ethylene glycol is a synthetic substance used in antifreeze production, which is odorless, has a sweet taste, and is extremely toxic to humans. Based on forensic evidence and other clues, the prosecutor's office accused Karjan of intentionally poisoning Rolando by mixing the substance with orange juice, which severely damaged his health and ultimately led to his death. A series of strange and tragic events in the Aquino family prompted the authorities to take drastic action. Suspicions arose over the cause of 9-year-old Elias's death, leading to a new investigation. The prosecutor's office launched a detailed probe into the boy's medical history. According to his mother, Elias was healthy and active until he suddenly slipped into a coma at his father's house, never to recover. However, the death certificate stated that the cause was a malfunction of his internal systems and cerebral thrombosis. Investigators doubted that a healthy 9-year-old could have died from such causes. The prosecutor's office requested information on possible ethylene glycol purchases and received a response confirming that Karjan had bought the poison on July 2, 2019, shortly before Elias arrived at the Aquino home. Relatives also confirmed that Karjan insisted on cremating Elias's body, but the birth mother refused, preferring to bury her son. The gathered evidence was sufficient for prosecutor Claudia Rios to file new aggravated murder charges against Karjan on March 4th, related to Elias's poisoning. On March 14th, a judge ordered Karjan's pre-trial detention, which she tried to appeal, but the judge rejected, ruling that she should remain in custody until the trial began. The highly anticipated trial commenced on November 28, 2022, at the Mendoza Criminal Court, drawing widespread public and media interest. 2 pending indictments were being addressed, one led by prosecutor Fernando Guzzo, focusing on the murder of Elias, and the other involving Claudia Rios, related to the murder of Rolando. Karjan's defense team sought to counter the charges, claiming that Rolando had a history of violence and abuse, and that there was insufficient reliable evidence to support the allegations. They emphasized that Karjan lacked a motive for the murders, pointing out that she was the sole owner of the house, cars, and business. The defense also argued that the charges against Karjan were unfounded and suggested that her partner might have purchased antifreeze by hacking into her account. Additionally, Karjan claimed to have an alibi for February 6th, the day her husband was poisoned, as she was not at home when he began experiencing health problems. After the initial phase of the trial, the defendant, dubbed the Gumalan poisoner by the media, was given the opportunity to speak. Emotionally, Karjan denied committing the heinous crime, stating that it was extremely distressing for her to be accused of something she did not do, especially considering she was a mother to 2 young daughters. The court hearing continued, with a focus on witness testimony that brought new aspects of the case to light. The prosecution questioned Karjan, targeting key points. Specifically, they asked her if she had suggested cremating her son Rolando. Karjan responded firmly that the decision wasn't hers to make, and she never made such a suggestion. Next, the prosecution called relatives of the deceased to testify, providing more details about what happened. Soledad Elias's mother took the stand, telling the court that after her son's death, Rolando told her that Karjan had suggested cremating Elias's body so that both families could keep the boy's ashes. However, Soledad rejected the idea. She also shared her memories of meeting Rolando at the cemetery, where he mentioned Karjan's jealousy. According to her, Karjan and Rolando's relationship was troubled to the point where they even slept in separate beds. Carolina, the mother of Rolando's first child, was another witness. She stated that her ex-husband Rolando and Karjan slept in separate rooms, although she had never interacted with Karjan before the incident. However, on the morning of February 8th, Karjan called Carolina to inform her that Rolando was ill and hospitalized. Karjan claimed that Rolando had probably taken some medication and was feeling unwell, and asked Carolina to help her unlock Rolando's cell phone, suspecting that he was seeing another woman. Carolina was shocked to hear about Rolando's condition, as they had met just a few days prior and he seemed fine. When she arrived at the hospital, Karjan was already there, talking to the doctors. Carolina was not allowed to enter, so she waited outside. As she was leaving, Karjan told her that everyone else had left, which made Carolina suspicious. She demanded an explanation from the doctors, who told her that Rolando had lost consciousness and was not responding to treatment. Carolina then complained to the hospital secretary and later spoke to Karjan, who claimed that Rolando had taken medication for skin blemishes, which caused an allergic reaction. According to Karjan, the medication bottle was no longer available because the housekeeper had thrown it away. The accumulation of these details only served to deepen the mystery surrounding this complex case. As the trial progressed, medical professionals and experts took the stand to present crucial forensic evidence, as well as the findings of a comprehensive psychological examination. This new evidence shed light on previously overlooked details that had gone unnoticed until then. Dr. Ivana Marinelli, a pediatrician at the hospital, recalled Elias's hospitalization in July 2019. At the time, Elias was rushed to the hospital with severe breathing problems and required immediate intubation. A CT scan revealed a severe blood clot in his brain. Elias received intensive care, and Dr. Marinelli confirmed that his symptoms matched those of ethylene glycol poisoning. These symptoms included impaired consciousness, restlessness, and eventually a coma, accompanied by a blood clotting disorder. Despite the medical team's best efforts, Elias's condition deteriorated, and at 5 p.m. on July 12th, he suffered cardiac and respiratory arrest. Medical personnel, including his father, attempted to resuscitate Elias for 50 minutes, but unfortunately, all efforts were in vain, and he was pronounced dead at 6 p.m. The jury reviewed the results of Karjan's psychological evaluation, which was conducted at the request of the prosecution. The experts' findings indicated that Karjan was dishonest and hid the truth, projecting an image of decency while actually being cold and cruel. Notably, a psychological examination was conducted shortly after her husband's death, but it revealed no emotional impact from the loss, raising questions about her sincerity and reinforcing her portrayal as a self-centered woman. The examiners also detected signs of hidden hostility and impulsive behaviors in Karjan. The prosecutor questioned Karjan's claim of being a victim of gender-based violence, as she had described in her testimony. This information collectively painted a detailed psychological portrait of the defendant. After weeks of tense anticipation and continuous court proceedings, the trial finally reached its conclusion. The packed courtroom was filled with people, their eyes fixed anxiously on the jury and the judge, awaiting the verdict that would bring justice to this complex and tragic case. The prosecutor asked the jury to convict Karjan, emphasizing that the evidence pointed to her as the mastermind and perpetrator of both murders. She bought ethylene glycol, got rid of the packaging, and made it look like regular juice. As a result, her loved ones suffered and died without her assistance. The prosecution and the plaintiff urged the jury to deliver a unanimous guilty verdict, insisting it was the only way to achieve justice. They wanted Karjan to be convicted of murder with evidence of extreme cruelty. In contrast, the defense argued that there wasn't enough evidence to prove their client's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. They claimed that a person's character, good or bad, doesn't necessarily determine their involvement in a crime, and that for their client, the deaths of Rolando and his son were a devastating tragedy. Despite the defense's arguments, Karjan joined the notorious ranks of Argentine criminals who poisoned their victims. After a lengthy silence and a tense wait for the verdict, the jury delivered their decision. In a unanimous verdict, they found Karjan guilty of murdering Elias and committing the crime with exceptional cruelty. Additionally, they convicted her of Rolando's aggravated death, which was caused by an insidious procedure. Karjan, dressed in black with white beads around her neck, remained expressionless as she heard the verdict. The jury's guilty verdict resulted in her receiving a life sentence in prison. Karjan, the defendant, attempted to evade punishment for the treacherous murders that shocked society and left many unanswered questions. Her plan to cremate the victims' bodies may have been her final attempt to avoid the punishment she deserved. Nevertheless, the court and jury remained unmoved by her tactics and delivered a just verdict. Why did Karjan kill her loved ones? This question remains unanswered, a mystery that continues to baffle. On the surface, she had everything one could ask for to be happy. Yet perhaps the root of her motive lay hidden in the recesses of her own soul, driven by jealousy, self-interest, or an inflated sense of pride. Despite the heinous nature of her crime, Karjan refused to acknowledge her guilt, leaving the true motives behind this dark act unclear. Now, as Canova faces a lengthy prison sentence, she will have ample time to reflect on the dark forces that may have consumed her, ultimately destroying not only her own life, but also those around her. This tragic tale serves as a poignant reminder that even in the closest of relationships, terrible secrets and mysteries can lurk beneath the surface, and that true love and loyalty must always be our guiding principles. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ellen Greenberg. Ellen Ray Greenberg was born in New York in June 1993 to Santa and George Greenberg. As their only child, she grew up in a loving and nurturing environment. During her high school years, Ellen was a dedicated team player and demonstrated great athletic potential. She was characterized as energetic, restless, and outgoing, yet she also excelled academically, particularly in the humanities. After graduating from high school, Ellen attended Pennsylvania State University, where she earned a degree in public relations. However, she soon realized this wasn't the career path she wanted to pursue. In parallel with her job, she enrolled in a pedagogical institute's correspondence department, and a few years later, successfully defended her diploma. Ellen then relocated to Philadelphia, where she landed a job as a junior high school teacher. Ellen's life was thriving, according to her relatives. She was bursting with enthusiasm, making ambitious plans for the future, and absolutely loved her work with students. It was during this period that she met Samuel, also known as Sam Greenberg, a young man from a wealthy and prominent family in the city. Sam's parents ran a large business, and his uncle was renowned as one of the top lawyers in the state. The two met in 2009 at a party through mutual friends and instantly clicked. Their friendly banter soon turned into a whirlwind romance, and they decided to move in together shortly after. As the clock struck 2011, on New Year's Eve, Sam proposed to Ellen, and the couple began making preparations for their spring wedding that same year. The news was met with joy from both families, and it seemed that nothing could come between the happy couple. Ellen threw herself into the delightful tasks associated with wedding planning, including drawing up guest lists, sending out invitations, choosing a venue and decorations, trying on wedding dresses, and organizing their honeymoon. Notably, Ellen took the reins on these preparations, with the groom seemingly uninvolved, although their loved ones didn't think much of it at the time. On January 26, 2011, a severe snowstorm hit the city. Ellen went to school as usual, but classes were canceled around noon due to strong winds and a blizzard, and students and teachers were sent home. Ellen returned to the apartment she shared with her fiancé, Sam. Later that day, the couple allegedly had a disagreement, which Sam initially confirmed but later denied. At around 5 p.m., Sam went to the gym in their apartment complex. When he returned, he found the apartment door locked from the inside. Sam first knocked loudly, then called out to Ellen by name, drawing the attention of their neighbors. He also tried calling her phone and sending messages, but there was no response to his knocking, calling, and yelling. However, it was clear that Ellen's phone was still inside the apartment. Sam went to the first floor of the building to ask the security guard for help. He explained the situation and asked if it was possible to open the front door, but the guard said he didn't have the authority to do so and couldn't leave his post. Sam returned to his floor, determined to take action. He used his shoulder to force open the door, managing to break the latch on the first try. As he entered the kitchen, he was met with a horrific sight. Ellen was sitting on the floor, her back against the cabinet door, her body brutally slashed with a knife and her clothes covered in blood. Sam immediately called emergency services, describing the scene. When asked to check Ellen's pulse, Sam hesitated, repeatedly asking if it was really necessary. Then there was a pause before he suddenly announced that there was a knife stuck in Ellen's chest, which he claimed he hadn't noticed until that moment. He concluded that Ellen was clearly already dead. The police officers who responded to the call were taken aback, having never encountered a scene like this in their extensive careers. They found the door locked from the inside with a latch, which Sam had later dislodged with his shoulder. There was no evidence of forced entry or intruders in the room. Nothing had been stolen from the apartment, and all valuables and cash remained untouched. The officers noted that nothing appeared to have been searched or disturbed. However, the most striking aspect emerged when the deceased girl's body was examined. There were no signs of struggle or attempts at self-defense, suggesting that the event occurred suddenly and the victim had no time to react. The body bore approximately 24 stab wounds of varying depths, with the fatal blow delivered to the heart, claiming Ellen's life. The investigation's gross negligence in examining the crime scene and the victim's body will be revisited later. This oversight allowed crucial evidence to go undetected, permitting a potential perpetrator to remain at large. What was even more bizarre was the police's behavior, who, even before the medical examination, seemed to think that Ellen's injuries were self-inflicted. The fact that Ellen had been experiencing panic attacks and was seeing a psychologist and was on prescription medication led them to believe that she had attempted to take her own life. Ever since she had started suffering from an anxiety disorder, Ellen had been prone to panic attacks. The situation was so severe that she had sought professional help from a psychologist. She tried not to burden her family with her concerns, and they, in turn, had attributed the changes in her behavior to pre-wedding stress and excitement. The psychologist who worked with Ellen had prescribed her 2 medications to help manage her anxiety, which she took regularly. As the psychologist would later report, neither of these medications, whether taken separately or together, could have had any adverse effect on Ellen's mental state, leading her to contemplate death. The specialist also noted that, despite her anxiety, Ellen had never had such dark thoughts. Ellen's friends and colleagues observed a change in her behavior after she moved in with Sam. She became anxious, restless, and hesitant to make decisions without consulting him. Whenever faced with a situation, Ellen would say she needed to discuss it with Sam and couldn't give an answer without his input. Ellen's parents also noticed these changes, but whenever their daughter tried to open up about her emotional struggles, she would insist that Sam was not the cause. Interestingly, 3 weeks before the tragedy, Ellen told her mother that she wanted to quit school, drop everything, and move back to her parents' house. Her mother was taken aback but reassured Ellen that she was always welcome to return home, no questions asked. However, Ellen never mentioned it again. Later, it was suggested that after the couple moved in together, Sam became violent towards his fiancée, and she lived in fear, too afraid to confide in anyone about the abuse. Although the psychologist Ellen saw did not confirm or deny this, they observed that Ellen struggled to put her feelings into words and describe what was troubling her. It seemed as though she wanted to reveal something significant, but her fear held her back. The case was plagued by inconsistencies and unanswered questions from the start. What's striking is that nobody made a serious effort to investigate these anomalies. The investigation was remarkably sloppy, with the crime scene and body examination poorly handled and expert analysis lacking. Many crucial details, facts, and evidence were disregarded and lost forever, making it impossible to reconstruct the events of the incident accurately. There were no signs of self-defense injuries on the victim's hands, suggesting that she did not try to fight back. Her body, however, showed multiple bruises. According to her fiancé, these were likely caused by her participation in team sports. Ellen's parents disputed this, stating that their daughter had not had time for sports or gym activities recently due to her busy work schedule and active wedding preparations. No suicide note was found, and Ellen's body showed signs of a brutal attack. Yet, investigators quickly suggested that she might have taken her own life. The presence of food spices and a cutting board on the kitchen table led them to theorize that Ellen had started preparing dinner, only to suddenly decide to end her life by cutting herself with a knife. However, the autopsy revealed that Ellen's body had nearly 24 stab wounds of varying depths, with 10 of them inflicted from behind. Given the severity of some of these wounds, medical experts questioned how she could have continued to move and inflict such injuries on herself, eventually stabbing herself in the heart. This raised serious doubts about the initial suicide ruling. Despite these contradictions, the investigation stuck to its original version, refusing to open a criminal case. The main reason cited was the lack of evidence of an intruder in the apartment and the absence of any signs of self-defense. Some concerns were raised about the possibility of forced entry into the apartment due to the unusual latch on the inner part of the door. This latch could be closed from the outside, but not fully. If the latch had been fully closed from the inside, it would have been impossible to break it open with a single shoulder blow without damaging the doorway. However, based on the nature of the damage, it appeared that the latch was only partially closed, which would have been possible from outside the door. Sam testified that he sought help from a security guard who accompanied him upstairs and witnessed him kicking down a door. However, the guard disputed this, stating that he never left his post. Despite this discrepancy, the investigation did not pursue the matter, deeming it irrelevant. The investigation reviewed footage from a single surveillance camera leading to the gym, which showed Sam walking towards the gym and then returning. Although it is possible that Sam exited through another passage and returned to the gym during the intervening time, his alibi was not investigated, and potential witnesses who could confirm or deny his presence at the gym were not interviewed. Sam didn't call the police until an hour after he discovered the door was locked, and his fiancée didn't respond to his knocking and shouting. When he finally made the call, the officer who took it noticed that Sam was acting strangely, despite his frantic screams and wails. The specialist was suspicious of Sam's behavior, thinking it was an act, because although he was calm enough to answer questions, his voice wasn't shaking when asked to start administering first aid. At first, Sam questioned the need to do so, then calmed down, and finally mentioned a knife stuck in his girlfriend's chest, which he claimed not to have noticed earlier. It's worth noting that before calling the police, Sam called his parents and his lawyer uncle, who arrived at the apartment before the police and went with Sam to the station to make a statement. The next day, Sam and his uncle went back to the sealed-off apartment to collect some personal belongings, taking all of Ellen's electronic devices, 2 laptops, a phone, and a tablet. A few days after the investigation began, detectives unexpectedly decided to examine the devices in question, only to discover that the search history contained queries related to suicide. When police officers arrived at the scene, they conducted a brief investigation and hastily concluded that Ellen had committed suicide. Even when new evidence came to light, they refused to reconsider their initial ruling. The sequence of events surrounding Ellen's wounds couldn't be determined, but it was clear that the fatal blow was to the heart. The medical examiner who performed the autopsy found this unusual and decided to conduct a further investigation. He sent a sample of Ellen's spine to a specialist to determine if her spinal cord was damaged. If it was, Ellen would have been paralyzed and unable to inflict the fatal wound herself. However, the specialist suddenly changed his mind, abandoned the investigation, and claimed that the spinal cord was intact. Despite this, the report was never attached to the case files. The authorities also overlooked the fact that, despite the extensive wounds on Ellen's body, there was very little blood at the scene, suggesting that someone may have cleaned it up. No one bothered to search for potential signs of blood being washed away. The luminol that could have been used to detect blood traces was ignored. Additionally, the trash cans in the apartment were not examined, which meant that any potential evidence they may have held was lost forever. The Greenberg family broke the devastating news to Ellen's parents about their daughter's death, as they were the first to arrive at the scene. Although Ellen's family lived several hundred miles away, they rushed to the location as soon as possible. Santa and George were in shock, refusing to accept that their daughter would take her own life. However, they were left with unanswered questions about the events of that night and received only a vague conclusion with no criminal investigation. Frustrated, the Greenbergs' family decided to launch their own inquiry with the help of independent experts. A private detective, intrigued by the case, offered his services for free. After reviewing the evidence, the detective concluded that Ellen's body had been moved after her death, evident from a dried blood trickle from her nose to her ear and smeared stains on the floor resembling drag marks. Furthermore, a guard recalled that Sam, who had sought help, was wearing boots, not a tracksuit as he had claimed. Despite the presentation of new evidence and witness testimony, the parents of the deceased were once again refused a criminal case or further investigation. In addition, they were refused access to case files, which included a recording of Sam's phone call to the police and surveillance footage. Years later, a young officer joined the county's homicide unit as an assistant prosecutor. Having heard about the unsolved and unusual case while studying at the university, he decided to conduct a further investigation. During his inquiry, he discovered that the injury to the back of Ellen's head suggested she may have been attacked from behind, and that there was no evidence of a spinal cord injury, contradicting the official conclusion. After re-examining the preserved spine fragment, an independent specialist concluded that the spinal cord had suffered damage in multiple areas, making it impossible for Ellen to have caused further harm to herself. Despite this, the police declined to initiate criminal proceedings. In 2018, the coroner officially ruled that all 20 wounds were self-inflicted, but Ellen's grieving parents filed a new lawsuit in 2019, alleging that the coroner and experts had not done their jobs properly. Although the lawsuit was heard and settled, the trials did not begin due to the pandemic. Ellen's family, friends, and colleagues are convinced that she could not have taken her own life, citing her aversion to the sight of blood and low pain threshold. The parents created a social media page to share official documents, new information, and alternative theories. In the summer of 2022, the case was dismissed once again, but the Greenbergs managed to transfer it to the district attorney's office, where a new prosecutor took over and reopened the investigation 11 years after the tragic events. However, to this day, the investigation remains unfinished. After the tragedy, Samuel made an effort to stay in contact with his estranged father-in-law and mother-in-law for the first year. However, he did not participate in the investigations they initiated. He refused to cooperate with the police and showed no interest in the case. He openly accepted the official account that his fiancée had inflicted the fatal injuries on herself. Samuel soon found comfort with another woman and married her just a year later. He and his new wife moved to a different state and ended all ties with the Greenberg family. Today, Samuel and his wife are raising 2 children together, and he tries to forget about his deceased ex-fiancée. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Soraya Sierra. Soraya Sierra was born on November 9, 1979, in New York, the second of 3 children in a large family. She grew up with her older brother David and younger sister Christina. Her parents, Dennis and Bethany Jimenez, were of Puerto Rican descent and had immigrated to the United States in 1973, settling in Manhattan, where their children were born. After moving, the couple joined a local Protestant community and converted to evangelical Christianity. They raised their children in a strict environment, adhering to the religious principles of their adopted faith. The family was regular churchgoers, socialized with other community members, and the children attended Sunday school. Soraya was an active and creative person who stood out for her strong will and complex personality. Unlike her younger sister Christina, who was quiet, obedient, and modest, Soraya was seen as a rebellious and mischievous individual. However, she still respected her parents and acknowledged their authority. In the Jimenez household, there were strict rules that everyone followed. These rules governed daily routines, everyday moments, and behavioral norms. For instance, the daughters were not allowed to interact with boys, go on dates, or stay out past 9 p.m. All their friendships were monitored, and their parents always knew who they were with and where. As a result, Soraya's life revolved around home, school, and church, and her social circle was limited to people she met in those places. Soraya, active, energetic, socially oriented girl, was bored and cramped within the framework in which she was kept, but her parents were sure that they were doing the right thing for the good of their children. During her school years, Soraya planned to enter a pedagogical university and become a teacher in the field of culture or arts. But closer to the end of her studies, she became interested in psychology and began to think about connecting her future profession with this field of activity. At a religious community meeting, a young woman named Soraya caught the eye of Stephen Sierra, a man 7 years her senior. He was the first to approach her, finding an excuse to chat. Soraya was just 18 at the time, and with her parents' approval, the two started dating. Stephen made a good impression on Dennis and Bethley, who thought he was a decent, polite, and honest suitor for their daughter. Though Soraya wasn't deeply in love with Stephen, she agreed to marry him, largely to gain independence from her parents' household and strict control. Despite having a good relationship with her parents, Soraya yearned for the freedom to make her own choices and shape her own future. Less than a year after they met, Soraya and Stephen got married in February 1999. At the time, Soraya was 19 years old and Stephen was 26. After the wedding, they moved to Michigan, where Stephen's parents lived. This was a big change for Soraya, who had spent most of her life in her native New York. The new surroundings seemed to invigorate her, and she threw herself into making their new house a home, enjoying new friendships, and exploring the local area. She got a job as a receptionist at a dental office and started thinking about pursuing a college degree. Soraya soon became pregnant and gave birth to 2 children, a boy and a girl. As a result, she had to put her plans to attend university on hold, as she was fully devoted to motherhood and found joy in it. A couple of years later, the Sierra family, now with 2 young children, made another move, this time to sunny California, where they settled in the charming Silver Lake neighborhood of Los Angeles. There, Stephen was offered a job opportunity. However, it soon became clear that his earnings were insufficient to support their lifestyle. After discussing their situation, they decided to return to New York, eventually settling into a modest rented apartment located near the home of the Jimenez family. At that time, the couple, Soraya and her husband, were struggling with serious financial issues. With Soraya staying at home to take care of the children, her husband had to make do with irregular income, which led to periodic debt. However, things started to look up when the children began attending school, and Soraya landed a job at an advertising agency. Around the same time, Stephen found a stable job as a bus driver on one of the city routes. In her late 20s, with the children grown and their lives stable, Soraya revived her long-held plans to pursue higher education. Unlike her earlier interest in pedagogy, she now opted for the psychology faculty at a local university. However, Soraya soon lost enthusiasm for her studies, finding the lengthy lectures dull and uninspiring. She decided to explore alternative fields, seeking a profession that would excite, inspire, and allow her to express herself. Since Soraya was a creative person with a talent for drawing and finding beauty everywhere, she became fascinated with photography. She joined a renowned New York photography community to develop her skills, and it soon became apparent that she had a real gift. Her ability to select the perfect angles and craft harmonious compositions produced stunning, beautiful shots. Even professionals praised her work for its creativity and vision. On the advice of her colleagues, Soraya created a social media page in early 2012, where she began posting her work. It didn't take long for her to gain a massive following, with thousands of users subscribing to her profile and enthusiastically commenting on each piece. In just a few months, she became a star, and her subscriber count continued to grow exponentially. The sudden fame left her feeling dizzy. Soraya felt a strong desire to achieve more and improve her skills, so she proposed organizing a group photo tour to search for unique and breathtaking locations around the world. Soraya Sierra began by taking short trips within her native country, where she developed a specialty in capturing architectural ensembles and historical monuments through her lens. Her photographs garnered great success, which fueled her desire to explore further. She set her sights on Istanbul, one of the world's most ancient and beautiful cities, intent on photographing its iconic landmarks and historical sites. Although her parents were hesitant about her traveling abroad for the first time, Soraya was resolute. They were concerned about her venturing out alone, away from home for an extended period. To alleviate their worries, Soraya agreed to be accompanied by her close friend, Magdalena. However, what her family didn't know was that they were going through a tumultuous time, and Soraya's relationship with her husband was on the brink of collapse. It's possible that her desire to embark on a photography tour on the other side of the world was, in part, a coping mechanism. She yearned to escape her situation, gain a fresh perspective, and reflect on her family's troubles from a distance. After feeling confined for too long, Soraya felt an overwhelming need to break free and do something that nourished her soul during that difficult period. Soraya's relatives were worried that she would be traveling by herself to a foreign country on the other side of the ocean. But she calmed their fears by promising to keep in touch daily through phone calls, letters, and photos. Besides, Soraya had already lined up commercial photography projects in Germany and Austria, which were part of her meticulously planned itinerary. In fact, her whole trip was carefully timetabled, with every hour accounted for, leaving no room for spontaneity or changes. On January 7, 2013, Soraya boarded a flight from New York to Istanbul with limited cash, a smartphone, a tablet, and a DSLR camera with professional lenses. After arriving, she called her family to let them know she had landed safely and was heading to check into a budget hotel she had booked in advance, located in a remote and apparently unsafe area. It later emerged that Soraya was not alone in Istanbul. She was accompanied by a young man named Taylan, whom she had met on social networks in mid-2012. Taylan was the one who had persuaded her to fly to Turkey for several months. During this time, they had been in close contact and had developed a strong bond. Soraya had complete faith in her new friend, and they spent almost every day together, exploring the city's attractions. As a native of Istanbul, Taylan was intimately familiar with the city and organized exciting trips to the most interesting and sometimes unusual places. After Turkey, Soraya traveled to Europe for commercial photo shoots, staying with longtime subscribers to save on hotels. In Vienna, she met a young man who shared her passion for photography and hosted her for 2 days. The trip went as planned, with Soraya visiting each destination and meeting everyone on her schedule. On January 21st, 2013, Soraya finished her photo tour and called her parents and husband to let them know her flight details for New York. As she had never spent so much time away from home before, everyone was relieved her trip was ending. However, before departing, Soraya decided to take a final stroll around the city to capture some last-minute photos for her account. When Soraya's father arrived at the airport to pick her up, she was nowhere to be found among the passengers. Her phone was also unreachable, and all attempts to contact her failed. Concerned, her father approached the airline representatives, who informed him that no passenger by her name was on the flight. Soraya's husband, Steven, immediately contacted her Istanbul hotel, where he was told that her belongings remained in the room and she hadn't checked out, despite being due to do so the previous day. She was also absent from the hotel for the second day. This news sparked panic among the family, who were left wondering where Soraya was and what to do next. Steven decided to investigate his wife's accounts, and what he found shocked him: a suspicious correspondence with a man named Taylan. Despite his reservations, Steven opted to reach out to Taylan directly to get to the bottom of things. Taylan claimed to have seen the missing woman just a day before she was supposed to depart, and surprisingly, she hadn't even bothered to call him beforehand, despite her earlier promise. Soraya's family promptly notified the American embassy in Turkey about the incident, and a large-scale search operation was launched the following day. A special unit was formed to handle the operation. Soraya's husband and parents flew to Istanbul soon after, deciding to personally oversee the search efforts, given the short time that had passed since her disappearance and the high likelihood of finding her alive. The police investigation began by looking into Soraya's social circle and speaking with people who had seen her shortly before she vanished. The hotel staff where she stayed, including her friend Tylen, were questioned. The hotel manager reported that he last saw Soraya the night before she disappeared, when she left with a small bag and a camera. She was supposed to check out later, but never returned to the hotel. The next morning, the hotel received a call from her worried husband, who informed them that Soraya's belongings and documents were still at the hotel. The receptionist also described the clothes Soraya was wearing on the day she went missing. Taran introduced himself as Tyran, but his true identity was later revealed. He declined to explain the alias, and it was discovered he'd been in close contact with Soraya for months, even inviting her to Istanbul. Despite this, Taran denied a romantic relationship, claiming they were just friends. The investigation retraced Soraya's steps via cell phone data and CCTV footage. She took the subway to Sultanahmet, visited the promontory, and then went to Eminönü Market, getting lost in the crowd. She reappeared on the subway, heading to Hagia Sophia, but soon vanished again, sparking concern. The search team decided to investigate the Hagia Sophia ruins, hoping to find someone who had seen a lone woman with a camera. After several hours of searching, they finally found a body, but it wasn't the outcome they had hoped for. Near the ancient Constantinople walls, they discovered the lifeless body of a young woman, covered with an old, dirty blanket that had hidden it from view. The investigators suspected that Soraya had been brought to this location, wrapped in that blanket. Forensic experts estimated that the body had been there for 10 to 12 days before its discovery. The lower part of the body was found unclothed, suggesting an act of violence, which was later confirmed by the experts. The autopsy revealed that Soraya had died from a severe blow to the head with a heavy, blunt object. Additionally, her body showed multiple bruises and 2 broken ribs. Pathologists also found skin particles and blood under Soraya's fingernails, indicating that she had fought back and scratched her attacker. The crime scene was both strange and absurd because, despite the thief stealing the victim's bag, smartphone, and camera, they left her gold earrings, wedding ring, and expensive watch, which immediately drew attention. The only lead from the area's camera footage was a young woman resembling Soraya filming something on her phone, followed by a man who either hit or pushed her, and then both disappeared from view. The attacker's identity remained unknown. Media leaks sparked scandal concerns. Investigators stay mum as bodies found, adding to mystery. Questions emerge. Why did the young married woman travel solo to Istanbul? How did she fund it? Initially, suspects included a lover and another acquaintance, but both deny involvement. Later, it emerged that the Viennese man who had given Soraya shelter had a criminal past, sparking speculation that he might have exploited the American as a drug mule. However, a thorough investigation disproved this theory. There were also whispers that Soraya could have been secretly working for U.S. intelligence, gathering intel in other countries, but this possibility was deemed unlikely. With a warrant in hand, police searched Talsali's home, collecting a DNA sample that matched the skin particles and seminal fluid found on the victim's body, confirming his guilt. Furthermore, the victim's phone was last active in the same neighborhood where Talsali lived. When the authorities discovered that the criminal had escaped to Syria, they lost all hope of capturing him. However, they received an unexpected surprise when Talsali was arrested while attempting to illegally cross the border back into Turkey. After joining the Syrian rebels and acquiring weapons, he was injured in the conflict and decided it would be safer to return home. In the end, he was caught trying to bring his weapon back with him, which led to his initial arrest. When Talsali was questioned, he gave a disturbingly detailed account of what happened. He claimed to have been on a hiking trail along the walls of Shebeku when he saw a young woman, Soraya, taking pictures. He admired her from a distance for a few minutes, then approached her. Despite the language barrier, he tried to communicate with her using gestures but failed to understand what she wanted. What caught his attention, however, was her brand new iPhone and expensive camera. As Soraya walked away, Talsali followed her, intent on robbing her. With night falling and no one else in sight, he saw an opportunity. When Soraya turned around and took a picture of him, Talsali became enraged and attacked her, hitting her on the head with a boulder. The two of them rolled down the wall, causing Soraya severe injuries, including bruises and broken ribs. After rendering Soraya unconscious, Talsali committed violent and intimate acts against her. He then delivered another severe blow to her head to kill her. Talsali stole Soraya's bag, camera, and phone and left the scene. On his way, he found a discarded blanket and returned to cover Soraya's body with it. By then, it was dark, and the chances of running into someone at the wall were minimal. Once he returned, he dragged the body to the side, positioning it so it wouldn't be visible from the nearby hiking path. He then covered it with a blanket and left the scene. During the search for the American woman, the perpetrator surprisingly revisited the crime scene to ensure she was dead and that her body remained where he had left it. When Talsali found out through the news that his victim's body had been discovered, he realized the police would soon be on his tail. So he decided to flee the country, borrowing money from his sister, who had always felt sorry for him. Incidentally, he was unable to benefit from the stolen goods, as the camera was damaged during the fall, and the smartphone was locked with a password he couldn't crack. As a result, he discarded the stolen items, including the signal, when he went on the run. The defendant showed no remorse, and DNA evidence placed him at the crime scene. Skin under the victim's nails, seminal fluid on her body. His phone was last used near his home, and a video recording caught the attack. After all the evidence was presented, the decision was made to conduct a psychiatric examination, driven by the suspicion that Talsali might be insane, given the disturbing nature of his actions, behavior, and the unsettling calmness with which he graphically described the atrocities he had perpetrated. Nevertheless, the experts ultimately concluded that he was of sound mind and fully cognizant of his actions when he attacked his victim in the summer of 2014. Judge Ely delivered the final verdict, finding Talsali guilty on all counts and sentencing him to life imprisonment. Soraya's relatives considered this decision fair and just. Following the necessary expert examinations, the body of the murdered American woman was transported back to her homeland in New York, with all related costs borne by Turkish Airlines. Soraya was laid to rest in a ceremony that respected all religious rites and traditions. Soraya's family created a memorial website in her honor, where they published her previously unseen works. The photos proved to be extremely popular, attracting buyers from all over the world. The money raised from the sale of these pictures was set aside to fund college education for orphaned children. Stephen, Soraya's husband, categorically denied that his family life was in crisis, which could have led Soraya to take that fateful trip. Shortly after, Stephen grew close to a girl from the Christian community who supported him during this difficult time, often visiting his home to help with his children and household chores. Just 2 weeks before the first anniversary of Soraya's funeral, Stephen married his new partner. By the time Talsali was finally sentenced, Stephen was already married and preparing to become a father again. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of the Buchanan family. Molly met Adam Buchanan, a divorced father of one, when she applied for an office manager position at his company. At the time, Adam was raising his son Nolan from a previous marriage on his own. Molly, a cheerful and sociable blonde, immediately caught the attention of the company owner, and the interest was mutual. They started a romance, which turned into a serious relationship, and Molly eventually moved in with Adam. Molly, who dreamed of a loving and friendly family, made an effort to build a strong bond with her stepson Nolan. Soon, she became pregnant, and they had a son named Gavin. Those who knew the Buchanans described them as a close-knit family of four. Adam, who owned a construction company, earned a comfortable living, and the family even purchased a vacation property in El Dorado County, California, a small cabin on 19 acres in Greenwood. The cabin was rustic with no electricity, water, sewer, or gas. But Adam, being in the construction business, actively worked on remodeling it, and the family frequently visited the cabin. On September 13, 2015, at 10 a.m., the Garden Valley Fire Department responded to a wildfire in Greenwood Township, western El Dorado County, on Highway 193 between Coloma and Georgetown. Upon arrival, they found that the fire had destroyed 10 acres of the property, and the cabin had burned to the ground, with charred remains in the ashes. The fire department personnel left the scene